Hello students and welcome to BA 131 Module 8. Here is the sequence. This is a short module. We have the introduction, the video lecture, homework, and the discussion, and of course the summary of Module 8. Let's go to the PowerPoint. Alright, Module 8, Government Translations. That's what we are covering this week. We have a blooper. We'll look at that in the module. We're talking about government agencies and the use of language. Part of this is the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, in particular the N400 and the review of terminology in English and Spanish. And then we have the activities, the deadlines, and a particular announcement for this week. So let's start with the international blooper here. This is former Mexican President Felipe Calderón, and he came to visit the White House, and in his speech, he said this particular sentence. Sé que compartimos el interés por promover condiciones de vida digna, legal y ordenada para todos aquellos trabajadores migrantes, muchos de los cuales, a pesar de su enorme contribución a la economía y a la sociedad de Estados Unidos, a su progreso, aún viven en las sombras, y en ocasiones, como en Arizona, confrontan incluso patrones de discriminación. So that is the speech, that is the point he's trying to make. There was consecutive interpretation, and you have the opportunity to watch that video. And here is how it was interpreted by the live on-site interpreter. We can do so with a community that will promote a dignified life and an orderly way for both our countries, who are, some of them, still living here in the shadows, with such laws as the Arizona law that is placing our people to face discrimination. This cannot be considered a good rendition of what he said in Spanish. If you click here, you're going to go to the YouTube video. This particular segment is around minute 28 and 37 seconds. And the misinterpretation was so blatant that there was a CBS News article about the misinterpretation. As you know, translators and interpreters are supposed to be transparent, are supposed to be not seen. Our work is to be the conduit for somebody to speak their message. And when the interpreter is in the news, that's usually not very good. So look at this article here as well. The interpretation was so bad that there was an official transcript that was issued later that day, which represents what Felipe Calderón actually said. I know that we share the interest in promoting dignified, legal, and orderly living conditions to all migrant workers. Many of them, despite their significant contribution to the economy and to the society of the United States, still live in the shadows and occasionally, as in Arizona, they even face discrimination. This is a proper rendition, and this had to be reissued because the live interpretation was not up to par. And I want you to notice something when you watch the video, that after this happened and a couple of other misinterpretations, Felipe Calderón concluded his remarks in English. He was speaking in Spanish in the beginning, as you'll see in the video, and the interpretation was so bad toward the end that he felt the need to finish his remarks in English. He went to Harvard. I believe he's a Harvard graduate of economics or something like that. So he does speak English. But in this occasion, he decided to speak in Spanish and have the interpreter give the rendition. But you'll notice at the end of the video how he transitions to English. So we're looking at government translations. And here are links that are also in the module. So we're just going to cover them here quickly. We have the IRS website that has a Spanish section. The U.S. Small Business Administration used to have a bigger Spanish resources section, but it does not have the Spanish resources that it once had. And once you look at the different websites of the U.S. Department of Education, U.S. Department of Labor, Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, You're going to notice that some of them do have the Spanish equivalent. And what I want you to do is to take a few moments to compare the two to see, for example, in the Department of Education, do you translate the names of the schools? Is Orange Coast College El Colegio de la Costa Naranja, right? Would you translate it as that? Or would you keep the name in English? We'll talk about that in the module. That's part of the lecture that is in the introduction. For your homework, we're going to review that in the module, but here's what we're doing. We're talking about asylum, and you're going to be translating some asylum interview questions. But we need to understand, if you're not familiar, what asylum is. So every year people come to the United States seeking protection because they have suffered persecution or fear that they will suffer persecution due to specific circumstances. It cannot be because of lack of opportunities. It cannot be because of lack of resources in your country. The specific requirements for asylum are persecution or fear of persecution due to race, religion, nationality, membership in a particular social group, or political opinion. And asylum seekers may be allowed to remain in the United States. To apply for asylum, they must file this form, I-589, application for asylum and for withholding of removal, within 1 year of their arrival to the United States, and there's no fee to apply for asylum. They may apply for their spouse and children who are in the United States at the time they file, or at any time until a final decision is made on their case. The child must be under 21 and unmarried, and there's more information about that on the actual form. And asylum seekers can check a pending application status by visiting this website here at the bottom. Now, there's some questions about the process, and specifically in our case about interpreting. One of the frequently asked questions is, should I bring an interpreter to my asylum interview? And this is from their website. We do not provide any interpreters during the asylum interview, except in the case of hearing impaired applicants. You must bring an interpreter if you do not speak English well enough to proceed with the interview in English. The interpreter must be fluent in English and a language you speak fluently, and must be at least 18 years old. So people cannot bring their children that are underage to be interpreters for them. And there are exclusions as to who can serve as your interpreter: your attorney or representative of record, a witness that is testifying on your behalf at the interview, or a representative or employee of the government of your country. And the regulations are there. These are the resources, and there's the asterisk about being hearing impaired. But though they do not provide interpreters for the interview, they use what they call contract interpreters to monitor that the interpreter that is brought is doing a good job. So the contract interpreter is limited to monitoring the interpretation by an interpreter provided by the applicant. And then they might occasionally interject if the applicant's interpreter does not provide adequate, accurate, and neutral interpretation. Now, this is an opportunity for you, if you feel so inclined, to become an asylum interview interpreter, but there are some challenges, some of which are these. Migrants come from Latin America under very difficult circumstances and are fleeing mostly violence from their native countries. Some of their family members may have been killed, their personal safety has been threatened, they may have been raped, etc. So these are difficult cases. And the interpreter must remain calm and composed, listening to difficult conversations. And it happens that many migrant children cross without adults, without their parents. And then they have tensions in a political climate, and the current administration is trying to close the borders completely, even for asylum seekers, which has been challenged by U.S. courts. And if you want to be an interpreter for asylum seekers, you must remain objective. Even if you're volunteering to interpret for asylum seekers, you must remain neutral and not intervene and not advocate for asylum seekers. And professional interpreters are scarce, and there's a need for training. And there's lack of funding to provide that. Usually the asylum seekers have to pay for the interpreter themselves. But there are opportunities, and I'll show you those in a moment. And as a good interpreter, you can bridge the gap and be a cultural mediator, and then you can be part of this solution to this problem. And here is a link to a volunteer interpreter training manual. I recommend that you download it. You can follow this link, and there's a place where you can download it right there to see if this is something that interests you as a possibility or to supplement your income. Even if you are a paid translator or interpreter at a full-time job, you can provide this service as well, or if you feel so inclined, you can volunteer your skills later on. And here you can follow these links to read some stories about interpreters. And volunteer opportunities are right here with Catholic Charities, alotrolado.org, and AJ SoCal. This is talking about your homework. We'll talk about that in the module. There's the asylum link right there as well. And you're going to use a Word document. Please save it as this format. Again, we'll look at that in the module. You have the forms. I'll show you that again in the module. And the due dates. We have the same due dates as every week. Your assignments are due on Sunday, the discussion Friday for your post, and Sunday for your replies to at least 2 of your classmates. And an announcement for this week. Next week is spring break. This is a 16-week course. This is week 8. So next week, we have a week with no instruction. So there won't be any homework or assignments. And if you're going to be sticking around, if you're not going away for spring break, you can use this time to catch up if you're falling behind. Let's go back to the module. Here is the introduction to the module. Go ahead and read through this. This is going to give you an introduction to what we are doing and the importance of accuracy when working in government settings, which is different than working for business, social media, etc. So go ahead and read through these. The reading assignments. This is the USCIS website in Spanish. These are the US naturalization forms. The form is in English. This is a Spanish translation that was provided by a volunteer organization. And here is the English form with notations. I want you to review that as well. To complete this module, you're watching the video lecture, you have the homework and the discussion. This is the link to the blooper we mentioned with Mexican President Felipe Calderon and his message lost in translation. And in this translators forum, translatorscafe.com, this is a thread about that. So feel free to peruse that and look at the comments that people made at the time. And here are some of the government websites. I mentioned some of these are in Spanish. So go ahead and look at these and compare them to the English. And here are for the Department of Education, SBA, IRS, and Consumer Affairs. The video lecture will be here, and this is a PowerPoint. The homework, you are going to open a Word document, name it as your last name underscore your first name dash homework 08. And you're going to translate into Spanish these questions right here. And the due date is Sunday. And for the discussion, go ahead and read through the introduction as we talked about. You're going to answer these questions and number your answers accordingly. And of course, you're going to submit your response by Friday and your responses to at least 2 of your classmates by Sunday. And as a reminder, in government translation, you are not just translating language because you are working with official information that people rely on. So precision, consistency, and informed decision making are essential. And this is a summary of Module 8. If you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, have a wonderful week.